Welcome to the Pregnancy Help Podcast. I'm Christine Grimmett, and I'm joined today by Valerie Harkins, Executive Director of the Maternity Housing Coalition. And we also have Emilie Oxley, Executive Director of Refuge Host Homes in Ohio, to talk about overcoming leadership obstacles in ministry. And Heartbeat International publishes an email newsletter each month called Heart and Home. And this features the latest news and topics for our maternity home ministries to be aware of, as well as some really great opportunities for prayer and networking. And this just helps connect all of our homes across the globe. So if you're not yet on that list to receive the Heart and Home newsletter and you'd like to know more, please contact us at support@heartbeatinternational.org. So Valerie and Emilie, it's great to have you on today. I can't wait to hear what you have for us.
Thanks, Christine. I appreciate that. So, I'm grateful for this podcast, which is set up really and truly. I think we just want to give a window into a coffee time with Emilie and I. It's a chat about a subject that we've both been thinking about and interested in. And so I brought my coffee today, Emilie, so I'm prepared. I don't know if you have
Oh,
coffee.
wonderful.
I do. I do. So Emilie serves on the advisory council for the Maternity Housing Coalition. And that is a group of niche maternity housing leaders. I say niche because the council is built of leaders that represent excellence in different areas of maternity housing. Um, and I had been watching Refuge host homes kind of build, from the outside. I get the privilege of watching lots of programs and homes build. And I noticed some positive things in Refuge host homes, some successes that were not had by others yet, at that point. And so I reached out to Emilie. And I remember when I reached out to you, Emilie, you were just kind of so surprised that I reached out to you to be a council member. And I was like, Emilie, I've been watching, and this kind of goes into this. I've been watching you build this organization, and I've been watching these accomplishments and, hearing the reputation of the organization and, these different things. And we had touched base, a time or two or so. And I remember saying, I'm just really curious or impressed with your leadership because Refuge Host Homes is currently successful in an approach that hasn't really been successful since the 80s. And you've taken that on and rebuilt it. And I'm just interested in you and what you're doing and having your voice in my ear as we develop coalition content and activities. So with that, Emilie, would you like to tell people a little bit about what is Refuge Host Homes?
Yeah. So, it's one thing I love to do when Valerie asked if I'd be interested in having this conversation, I said yes, because I love to talk about journeys and processes and how people get from point A to point B and then have energy to keep going past point B. And so I think that really sums up a lot of actually our journey with Refuge Host Homes. So we were established in 2022 as a host home model. So we are looking at the issue of maternity housing or lack thereof in our community. And we just didn't have anything in our surrounding counties specific support for pregnant women that needed housing. And so there are many models out there, primarily, the maternity housing model, which is a group homes type of structure. And that just didn't seem to be quite the fit for our community at this point. And we started to explore what other options were out there. And we're really drawn to the idea of using homes that are already in our community, Christian families or single women who already have a home and there's an extra bedroom. And what would it look like if we connected them so that a woman that was experiencing a crisis pregnancy could actually live with that family in a host home setting through her pregnancy and transition into motherhood. And so a lot of it just began with questions like, what would this look like? What could this look like? Does this exist? Is there somebody that we could learn from? And what we started to see was that this model, as you alluded to, Valerie, it really doesn't exist right now in our country. So it's not that it hasn't in the past. It's not that it doesn't currently in other places, but it was
The best way to say that. That's the
it was
best clarifying way to explain that.
because I will always say this is nothing new. We are not
Yeah,
reinventing the wheel. Like
right.
people have been opening up their homes to other people in need across all time, right? And especially as Christians, like we see that in the Bible specifically, we are asked to open our homes to the sojourners and the widows and the oppressed and the orphans. Share your home. Like this is not a new concept. But we didn't have a context to really make that reality in our country right now. There wasn't a model that we saw that we could emulate. And so we said, okay, well, I guess we're going to start creating something and see what happens. And so the last 3 years, actually our first host home opened March of 2023. So we're coming up on 3 years of host homes open and functioning. And what we have experienced is a journey that has started out with a lot of questions. What would happen if? What would happen if we invited them to become family? We start with that question and then we kind of watch and see what happens as we're connecting more and more pregnant women with more and more host homes. We're discovering all of the things that happen if you ask them to become family. Some of those are great, positive things. Some of those are really hard, really challenging. And so my team, we have had to pivot constantly. Even though we have a mission and a vision that has not changed in the last 4 years, the ways that we do things have had to change and they've had to pivot and we've had to be really responsive to the current needs of our community. And so with that, my leadership role has had to pivot drastically many times in the last 4 years. And so I think, yeah, this is why I'm excited to talk about this because I've literally seen this play out before my eyes in the last 4 years. And I'm just so curious as to what God's doing. And I'm excited to see how we can keep encouraging others in journeys that they didn't expect to take. So.
Well, for those wondering, what is this topic we keep saying we're going to talk about? And so our little coffee chat for today is leadership. Now, leadership is. I sometimes I'm often looking for a different way to describe this because leaders in particular, I feel like are just inundated with content for quote unquote leadership. Um, but so I don't, I hadn't really pinned the best alternative word. Probably there isn't one. That's why this is the one that's used most. But I don't know about you, but in my experience, what I have learned the most thorough, and been able to apply what I've learned with the greatest amount of excellence has come from my failures in leadership. Like there's
Yes.
all the wins. There are some wins. There's actually a pretty significant amount of wins, I would say. Yet somehow the fails, the L's on the board, are the ones that become the greatest teachers.
Yes.
For me, I don't know. Would you say? Does that resonate with you?
Yes, definitely. It's those times when you're like, well, that didn't work, and then God uses that opportunity to say, are you ready to try something different now? Because we've kind of proven that that wasn't the best way. And I think we're more open to learning new ways maybe after we've failed. In a good way, our confidence is shaken a bit. And so we're more open and curious to try something new.
Well, there's been a couple of things. One, there's my own failures that have happened. So I've been working, and I was thinking about this. And it just hit 20 years in this movement.
Wow,
This
that's
move, which
amazing.
is to say also that I got started in a very deep way working in maternity housing when I was very young.
Yeah.
And so I was working behind the scenes of a maternity home, and I was given access to all of the knowledge and inner workings of running that particular home. I was adopted by a couple that was running a maternity home. And they said, you are Harkins now, and this is what we do in our
Okay.
family. And it was their home, and they were bringing in, up to 6 pregnant women at a time into their personal home.
Wow.
And,
Wow.
and so that was an experience, and I was responsible now with them to run the home and for it to go well, right? To volunteer golf tournaments and receipt tracking and all the stuff that
Uh-huh.
doctor's appointments and chores and everything. And I had no idea what God was doing at the time. But, in the midst of all of that, as I went to school and on, I found that I was given kind of thrown into some director positions at a
Yeah.
very young
That
age,
that's what that
right?
sounds like.
Right, because then I had this inordinate amount of, experience,
Uh-huh.
right?
Mhm.
And, education, I'm a bit of a nerd, so whatever I'm interested in, I had gone deep in learning.
Yes,
And
yes.
so there's this concept of like, "Oh, this young woman knows things," right? And then now I'm put in charge of not just knowing things, but like developing people, humans. There's just human piece of it. And so there was so much that I learned through my own maturation and leadership development and failures that are kind of like commingled in there and wins as things got moved along. But then in that time period, time went on. I had some amazing experiences working with other homes and went on to work with other homes. And um, I started working with the Maternity Housing Coalition. And uh, this was a whole different ballgame because now, day in and day out, I was given exposure to the behind the scenes, the inner workings of maternity homes everywhere, right?
Yep. Yep.
All over the world. It just is something. We're working with 313 homes right now. And I began to learn a lot, not just from my own wins and my own losses, whatever that might be, I, now from others. And it began to observe and to watch and to find out, what am I watching for?
Huh.
One
Mhm.
of those things that I watched and noticed was, you know, every organization goes through crises. It's not even one crisis, it's crises.
Yep. Yep.
The How the executive director responds is critical. It really is make or break. I saw several organizations close their doors last year. And so I kind of got to work on figuring out what was going on behind this. And what I found is that there were all of these crises that had happened for reasons, for all kinds of reasons, right? Um, and yet I found that those crises didn't just hit the homes that closed. That's what fascinated me. They
Yes.
hit just about all of them. I
Yep.
don't know if you felt any turbulence last year.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, like the response, if the same crises or type of crises are happening in different areas, but there's a different outcome, that means there's a different response at
Right.
some level. And I think that that's where, we see um, that there's a response level at a staff level. Like there's an immediate response to a crisis that usually happens at a staff level. And yet, then there's a response that happens farther up at the leadership level. And that's the one that seems to matter the most because we're human. We're going to say things that we shouldn't have said. We're going to do all kinds of things in crises that we maybe aren't proud of. But what happens next after that is what determines so much of the fallout. And so much of that responsibility lays in the leader's hands of the next step.
One of the things that jumped out to me in watching this happen, different crises, different pressures happen with orgs all over. Um, One, some homes had a record-setting year financially, and others uh, went under,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Financially, like it's, and it's not even one particular. I mean, both of those. There's quite a few homes in both camps, right? That was interesting to me. It, I was really looking towards leadership. What happened there, and this concept began to jump out to me. I kind of started testing the waters, and I found, I think this is pretty well true, that the leaders that were prepared to respond in an intentional, strategic way almost didn't realize they were responding. They were doing it in the moment, meaning it came as a healthy reflex. And I was like, how did they get that healthy reflex? And this, you know, kind of sports analogy came to my mind where, you have one, you have your time for practice, and you have your time for coaching, and you have your time for reviewing film. But once you're on the field, you either have the skill or you don't, right? You either practiced it or you didn't. And the number of hours you invested into that practice is pretty evident, but you can't change the results in the moment. It's just you're working with what you got to work with. Boom, right there.
Yep. Yep.
Now, afterwards, we can review what happened, and edit, right? Do what
Yeah.
you got to do.
Yeah.
But I realized that for so many of us on our team, but especially for the executive team, our investment into leadership development happens before the crisis hits. It happens when things feel smooth and we're not having any staff problems. Once the crisis hits, your reflex is your reflex.
It
It's either
has to be
been
reflected.
developed or it hasn't, and we have to manage what we have to work with, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's going to turn out how it does. And
Mm-hmm.
we
Mm-hmm.
see some varied responses. It kind of seems to me that when an executive director specifically is in crisis, right? So there's the organization that's in crisis,
Yep. Two
but then the
different.
ED. When the
Uh-huh.
ED is in
Uh-huh.
crisis, it kind of feels like the organization itself has no ceiling, or it has no limits. If you could imagine a playground with no fences, no,
Yeah.
right? Everybody
Yes.
tends to
Anything could
draw in
happen. Anybody
close.
could come in. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
and also, but everyone, like, I don't know if you've ever seen or heard this analogy, it's given in the Boundaries book by Cloud and Townsend, that when you have boundaries like a fence, kids play on a greater uh portion of the playground when there's a fence. But when there's no fence, they draw in close because they don't know where their limit is,
yes.
right?
Yes.
And I've noticed somehow that principle transfers when the executive director is in crisis. I notice the staff pulls in tight, right? The anxiety tightens, the decisions begin to really narrow, our creativity limits. Everybody just kind of gets into this survival stiff space, right? Versus whenever the executive director is somehow keeping some stability that we'll talk about, people tend to feel like it's okay. They loosen up a little, conflict happens, it gets resolved, we have these creative strategies, right? It kind of feels like the waves aren't quite so big and overwhelming. Have you felt that or experienced that?
Yeah, like I think the one thing that jogged my memory when you were talking about reflexes, right? Like we know from brain science, like I'm actually reading this really fascinating book right now called Rare Leadership, and it keeps talking about the fast track brain and the slow track brain. And so your fast track is things that you just it happens subconsciously, you just respond. And those things are your first reaction. But then your slow track brain is the one that makes, choices, conscious choices about how you want to respond. But your fast track has already happened. Like you've already made an initial reaction. And so that's the one you have to train is your fast track, the one that you have to work really hard to make sure that your initial reaction is going to be coming from a place of joy, a place of peace, a place of security, so that you then have time to respond to the other things that have to happen. But I think as a leader, especially if you are being caught up in every single crisis that is happening, whether it's personally to you or just to your organization, if you are responding and out of a reflex of fear, out of a reflex of insecurity or just anxiety in general, then it is going to have a trickle down effect throughout the rest of your decisions, your actions, and then the impact on your staff. And so I've had to really, really understand more of this because it became very, very pertinent to me and my ministry. Because I've come into this similar to Valerie. I was not looking to start a nonprofit. I was not looking to be an executive director. On paper, I have zero training. Like this is not something that I am feeling equipped to do. And yet, over the last 4 years, God has allowed several situations that have forced me to take responsibility for my own learning. As you said, you're a bit of a nerd and you love to read. I've been reading like crazy, learning and figuring things out and trying new things because it was pertinent. It wasn't because somebody was saying I should do it. It's because I needed to do it in order to help the ministry survive. And so back to that fast track, slow track brain, like I have to set aside specific time and participate in specific rhythms to allow my brain to be ready to respond in the moment. And if I am having my own crises, even just personally, that I'm already on edge, I'm already nervous, I'm already anxious about something else, it is going to affect every other part of our organization. And that's a lot of weight on a person or a team. But I think what I loved about your article is that it shows how when we share the weight with other people, it actually lessens the pressure on a specific person, while also allowing them to have more leadership skill and allows them to have a much more robust impact on their ministry, even though there's less pressure on them. But it takes a lot of before, as you said, work before crisis happens, because once you're there, if you don't have the skills, you don't have them. Like it's not innate. It has to be built. And the building work has to be done in times of relative peace.
Yeah. So, what comes to mind while you're talking is this tension. I think sometimes it happens, especially for us that are in faith-based work, faith-based ministry, is that, much of this practice of leadership excellence isn't as much of a character issue as we would like it to be. And let me say when I say that, I mean, when it's a character problem, we know what to do, right? We're familiar as Christians, and particularly Christians that tend to find themselves in this type of work, right? They're sincere and faithful. And when it comes down to heart work, they're like, I'm on it. Let me tell you, I can show you a contrite heart and some Bible study and some real good repentance and, the power of words, all these good things that form excellent character, which is probably why they were chosen for the role, to be honest, is because of that character. Yet when it comes, sometimes that character, while it's definitely of course, impacts leadership, I think there's a tension there that it's not enough, right? You can have this excellent character and a holy character and find yourself really struggling. And what I found is that there's a formation deficiency there sometimes, oftentimes, and that we're really finding that there's this concept of practiced steadiness that
I
is
loved that phrase when you wrote that.
so important. And to practice steadiness, it's pretty easy to practice steadiness when nothing's wrong. But when these crises hit, like that is also a form of of practice, right? Are we handling the minor pieces of daily life in a way where we have this mindset and diligence and steadiness so that we can, in essence, keep a low enough heart rate to think clear
Yes.
when something comes up, right? Because the moment our cortisol and adrenaline starts pumping, it affects how we think. I say like this, I was talking to someone not that long ago, and I was like, have you ever noticed that when you're angry, if you think of a time when you're in an argument, maybe with a sibling or your spouse, and you're really angry, and, your blood is pumping in that moment, whatever you are arguing, you are convinced you are the most right person that has
Yep.
ever existed. And of
Yep.
all matters, you are the most right on
You're
this
sure of
matter,
it.
right? You're like, this is it. I just know. And you swear you have 20/20 vision. You
Uh-huh.
s-
Uh-huh.
Cortisol is just so deceptive to us. And then later, what happens? Things calm down. You start to reconcile, and you're kind of like,
You see reality.
well,
You
you
see
know,
your spot in the
I
picture.
wasn't totally spot on with that, and I can kind of see it a little different now, and you end up having to apologize for your side of the street and,
Yep. Yep.
things said. But what happened? Because an hour or a week ago, you were so convinced in the righteousness of your justice.
Mhm. Yeah.
I and I believe that while, yes, there's you know, the Holy Spirit works in us and there's character pieces that happen and we pray. Absolutely. There's also this other element, this biological element that we can pay attention to in our daily rhythms, which is steadiness. When the cortisol comes down, the adrenaline comes down, our brain functions differently. Now our prefrontal cortex, I always say that's the part of the brain that you want your teenage son to use, but somehow he
Uh-huh.
can't seem to access
It's
it.
just, yeah,
It's
flies
there.
out his ear, as my friend says.
With
It's
all the
gone.
like logic and reasoning and planning, that part
Yes.
comes back on, and we're
Mhm.
no longer in our amygdala, which is our fight,
Mhm.
flight, freeze kind of
Yep.
panic mode. And we really do see things different. So the question then becomes, what can we do to invest in our formation as a leader so that we become over time more and more steady in every circumstance
Yeah.
across
Yeah.
the
I
board?
mean, I think I love that this has gone to the brain science spot because I will geek out there because I every time we learn more about how God actually designed our brains to work, it makes everything else make so much more sense. Like
Right.
if we are stuck in the fight and flight, we are going to have all, like you said, all this cortisol pumping through our brains, and there is a positive to that sometimes is helpful, right? It gives us clear thinking for a moment. It gives us some power to say words. It gives us physical strength that we need, but then we crash later. And so it's interesting to watch this play out in leadership, but also what you said about practicing steadiness, because what we also know about neuron development is that the connections are strengthened in times of repetition. And so if you are practicing steadiness in the mundane things of your life, then when a big thing happens, your brain is going to know what to do. There's not going to be a question. It's going to be like, yeah, we recognize this. We've done this. We did this Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. This is Friday, and it seems a little more stressful, but really we know how to react in a healthy way because we've been practicing in the mundane things of life. And so for me practically, I see this playing out because I have a 9-year-old, 11-year-old, and a 13-year-old, and woo, emotions are high in our house. Like there is always somebody in crisis. Okay. And what's interesting, I literally get to practice, having a conversation, helping a kiddo work through a conflict at school or maybe they're blowing up at me and I got to keep my cool and remember, like, I'm the adult here. I can share my calm, not join their chaos. Like, yes, I can be the calm person. So I'm practicing that on a Tuesday night. And then I walk into our office on Wednesday and you know what? I am faced with adults who are doing the same thing. And my brain is not freaking out because I just practiced this yesterday with
Right.
the stakes were much lower, right? With my 9-year-old, stakes were much lower. And yet my neurons are firing because I know what to do. I have practiced staying steady in a confrontational situation and I can speak clearly and calmly and I can slow things down and I can help restore calmness to the situation. And so practically, yes, there is a lot of things we can do. Really strengthening our vagus nerve, getting our brain to be okay with the adrenaline that is caused in crisis. Yes, that is the physiological spot. And also the mental side of saying, I am going to choose to practice these things in times of calm so that I can easily recall them in times of crises. But we have to make those choices way before calamity is happening. And that's the hard part to do because you had talked a little bit about, we're so busy. Like as leaders, we're so busy. There's always more to do. And we think like, oh, we don't have enough time. We don't have enough time. Well, actually, the more time we put into investing in these healthy reactions are going to save us boatloads of time later. And you called it reworking. We're not going to have to rework situations because we're going to handle it well the first time. And that's going to give us a lot of time back. So it is worth it. And it is worth it for new leaders as well as seasoned leaders. Because we are always learning new things. Like we are hardwired to learn consistently the rest of our life. And so if we ever get to a point where we think, we got this leadership thing, under our belt, then watch out because there's something coming that is going to force you
Always.
to learn something new. So,
Especially as fast as our society is changing and
oh my
developing
gosh.
right now. But
Yes, we
one
can't
of
keep
the
up.
areas, there's nothing that brings reactivity to the scene for an executive director faster than money.
Yeah.
Money will
Yeah.
do it, right? And particularly when the bank account's getting low or it's fundraising time, the executive director is feeling all the pressure of fundraising. Might have team members that have families and they're dependent
Yeah.
on that. In
Yeah.
housing, especially, you have entire women and children dependent on
Yes.
your
Shelter.
effective
Your
fundraising,
shelter.
and
Yes.
it can really build up. And one of the things I will tell you, that you're ready for this, it's so uncomfortable. I don't know if you're so I've had a
I
few
can respond
people
calmly. Go ahead.
I've had a few friends that lovingly were like, kick rocks, don't talk to me about this. Playfully, but this concept, when the executive director is in crisis, which to tell an executive director in crisis they're in crisis is just always a
Yeah.
circus. But it affects the donors. It affects everything. And the thing that's hard in this cycle is that sometimes that reactivity and crisis from the executive director was triggered from finances, and then it ends up further affecting the finances that happen with that. And we have these wonderful response strategies that are very important, right? Such as prayer, that we say God's going to provide. We're going to pray. Absolutely. There's this other piece that bleeds into this, that it's our skill set and our mindset that ends up from our own crisis bleeding into the donor conversation. And what's important is it begins slowly to compromise our relationship with the donors, and the donors relationship. So we might find that the donors still really believe in our mission, right? But interacting with and hearing appeals from an executive director that is coming from a place of victimization or helplessness or crisis, not I don't want to say all crisis, because we do sometimes have to go to donors and say this particular situation has, come up. But when that begins to bleed into this desperate cry of we are perpetually drowning, help me, uh, and it transitions into pity, right? Versus vision. I'm pitching this vision. This is an
Mm-hmm.
investment. I come from a place of steadiness and confidence. This crisis has come up, but here's what we're planning, right? The donor begins to, I spoke with several this last year, they begin to pick up almost like an emotional fatigue that comes,
Yeah.
like an unspoken, intangible emotional fatigue from interacting not just with the organization overall. I mean, it was shocking to me. I learned a lot, but it was specifically from the ED. Now, contrary, on the flip side, I learned a lot. Remember those other EDs that were experiencing crisis also, and there was turbulence in the organization? The way they responded to that provoked larger donor gifts, if you can imagine, right?
Yes.
So they were hit
Yes. Yeah.
with
Seen that.
insanity, right? And in many of those instances, they turned that because they were practiced and their skill set was ready to handle that, that actually ended up resulting in more money, right? And the donors
Yeah.
became more
Yes.
invested.
I've
And so
seen
I
it.
learned that the way that a leader is responding uh, day in and day out, and their confidence, don't hear me say arrogance, because I can do that, confidence, their steadiness really protects the relationship that the donor has to the mission and to the ED, which we know that donors give but largely from a place of relationship, right? Donors that give consistently and in a significant degree do that from a place of relationship, and whatever that their relationship is to your mission, of course. But it affects the bank account, right? And it can kind of send the leader onto this cycle of, oh my gosh, we don't have enough money. And then they go into the crisis, and then they project this further crisis, and then it makes the money worse. And then they're like, we don't have money. And then it, it just
It,
can be
it keeps
this.
going. It's never ending.
Yeah, it can be emotionally
Yeah.
costly to the donor, even in, this is such a millennial word, so I get it, but it's just like in vibes. It really is. It's a vibe. It's a whole vibe.
Man, that
It's
word,
just
that
emotionally
word.
costly.
Oh, yeah. But I think like as much as we say like it's a vibe, it's also a mindset that the leader has. Like, are we operating out of an abundance mindset or a scarcity mindset? Because that has made all the difference in my thinking and in our processing, is that if we truly believe that there is enough, whether it's finances, staff, time, whatever, fill in the blank, if we truly believe that we operate with an abundance of it, then God has given us what we need to do the thing he's called us to do. Now, the flip side of that, if you're operating in scarcity, thinking we always need more, we always are going to be short, we're always going to have to be working harder to get more so that we can do
Sure.
fill in the
Yeah.
blank, it totally changes your approach, not only to your donors, but to the situations that arise. Because if we had a similar thing that happened, like you said, we thought, oh man, this is going to cost us. Like, this partner church has worked with us and sponsored this mom, and now this house is trashed, and like we're asking the church, like, we actually need more money to pay the landlord the security deposit back because we're not. It was a mess on our end, and it turned out that church came back to us and said, we watched how you walked through that, how your staff handled that situation, and it makes us trust you more, and we want to work more with you. And we were sitting around the table totally jaw dropped, like we thought we had killed the relationship and killed their confidence in us, but they're watching for what you're going to do next. How are you going to handle the
Yes.
next thing? Because you can't control
Yeah.
what comes at you. You have no idea what's the curveball is going to be thrown at you. And if you miss it, then the only thing you have to do is you have control over if you go pick it up and what you do with it and how you care for it after that. And so I think I've seen it, what you're saying. And we have to go back to our mindset. Are we in a scarcity mindset, or do we operate out of an abundance mindset saying God's provided what we need? We
But
got to
the
see it.
abundance mindset also is goes hand in hand with our joy, right?
Yes.
And
100.
I think our staff and our donors and our community really resonate with joy. If you are a leader that's communicating to your board and communicating to your constituents that in the midst of all this difficulty, you have joy, not fake joy, like authentic joy, uh, that you
I
really
call
do
that
believe everything is okay. You
I
really
do.
do. You
I
really
do.
believe that. Yeah.
I call that defiant joy, because it's like that picture of like that daffodil that has, sprung up, and it's still snowing now, because I don't know, in Ohio we get these daffodils come up in the spring, and then, 2 days later the snow and the rain and these things are being pelted, and yet it's that bright little yellow head just bobbing up and saying, like, I'm not taking this standing down or laying down. I am going to be defiantly joyful in this hard thing. And I think that's what communicates confidence for future decisions to donors or stakeholders, board members, staff, that they watch you go through a hard thing and you don't lose your joy. And that's what makes the difference.
Emily, how do you, just curious, like a window into your personal practice here, uh, how do you resist isolation as a
Mm.
leader?
Oh man, this is, I just got off a 2-hour conversation with another ED, and we just ended up crying and praying together. Like, hey, like, this is hard for you, it's hard for me too. This is the place where I don't have to be the strongest, calmest person in the room, the most responsible person. I can say I don't have this, and someone can say I don't either, but that's okay. And that it has taken, I have about 4 EDs that run various different ministries. They're actually, none of them are housing related. They are all vulnerable women related, but
Yeah. Yeah.
I get together with them regularly, and we just share, and we pray for each other. We share very honestly. Um, because that's one of the biggest lies I think Satan wants to use in leadership, is that you are the only one, and that you have to figure this out on your own, and that you can't, like, you're an imposter. Nobody else is really dealing with this. You're the only one that is dealing with this hard thing and pretending to run a ministry at the same time. That's just not true. And so the more we're honest with each other as leaders and give each other safe spaces to share, like, that's what's going to strengthen all of our ministries.
One of the things that I think helps, and I really feel like is growing, this virtue of kindness, and sometimes I think inclusion can be a virtue, um, is growing among our network, uh, particularly of homes. I know elsewhere as well. I can remember when, maybe even 7 years ago, perhaps, an attempt to network and being in different environments with other, even housing leaders. At that time, I was pursuing, my job was to design and build a pretty hard program that looked very different from everyone else's. There was 4 of them. That was
Yeah.
part of what I was doing. And
Yeah.
um, and we were serving intentionally the hardest population of our very large metro city. And we were looking at who are the women that don't qualify everywhere else, and how can we help them to, at minimum, carry to term, which we built out programming that went far beyond birth. And that was a very hard population. And I at that time, I experienced an isolation because I did not feel accepted by peers, because I was doing something different and something new and something
Different.
hard.
Yeah.
And that was very hard. I ended up needing to turn elsewhere. um, to find that support. And I'm very happy to say I believe that now our culture is growing
Mm-hmm.
so much in resisting this. However, and I think in a very positive way, 2020 really brought this out that we realized we really need each other. Now, I think about this when we're resisting isolation, thinking about what can we contribute to the culture. uh, we all reap what we sow. So how
Yeah.
do we sow um, kindness, openness, acceptance to other leaders in our community that maybe have a different perspective or on a different mission altogether, in a way that they feel comfortable coming out of their shell and talking about what they're doing that's different. Uh, and maybe we'll learn from them. Maybe we won't learn. Maybe we'll grow relationally. Whatever that might be. Uh, but I think these are aspects that we can contribute, that we then later benefit from reaping from that culture that we've been
Absolutely.
helping to develop, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. I think that's, and I think like we've even seen, well, I appreciate how you encourage when somebody comes to a consultation with you. You're always thinking like, who could I connect them with? Like, who else is doing something a little bit similar, maybe, that I couldn't connect them with? Because I think like you've sent several to me, and it's been interesting just to start sharing and walking their journey with them a little bit. I'm still doing my own thing, and I'm responsible for my own pieces, but I certainly have an hour to listen. And I certainly have an hour to ask good questions and to say, hey, I had that too. And it's like that amazing things can happen in 60 minutes when you connect on a real honest level that can empower the next 40 hours of your work week. And so to not underestimate the value of spending time just sharing with other leaders, other EDs, it's huge. And what you said, we reap what we sow. So if I'm willing to be transparent about my journey, then they're hopefully going to be willing to be transparent about their journey for the next person who needs to hear from them. So it creates this beautiful, yeah, ongoing cycle, which really echoes and shows us what the body of Christ is supposed to be, right? We're not all supposed to be doing the same thing, but we're all supposed to be attached in some way to the true source of life. And so if we give each other permission to make mistakes and have a bad day and still share the joys and pitfalls together, then we see that really, yeah, leading doesn't ever happen in isolation. It shouldn't, and it really can't. And that's actually a lot of hope to know that it doesn't have to.
Yeah, one of it, and it is a lot of fun. One of the things that can get a little bit hard as you go up the leadership ladder, if you will, the organizational ladder, people will say it's lonely at the top. I hear that's a common phrase, and one of those reasons is because it can feel like you kind of run out of mentors. Right?
Yeah.
There's you run out of advisors almost. Um, and now you are, the advisor to all. And you're like, wait a second, I just love Jesus. How did I get here?
Uh-huh.
I
Yeah.
read,
Yeah.
I love Jesus and I read books, or some of us went to school for different whatever. But um, what happened? And for those that are not an executive position, I am often encouraging if you don't have a mentor or two, that needs to be like right now. We need to start praying and getting working on that. But that seems to fall off a bit as you get to the top of the ladder. Like who is my mentor? And that I think that begins to transition a little bit into a mutual camaraderie. That's where that
Mhm.
temptation, it's very easy to slip into isolation. But, having peers, selected, intentional peers that will be lovingly honest with you
Yes.
is a game changer. I had a meeting not that long ago with someone from our council that I've been, working on handpicking. It's about a dozen people there, all gifted in different areas. And I've been working more in the last 12 or so months to also use the council for my own development and accountability, and and help, right, so that I can have also this concept of peers that we need. And as I was listening to someone speak into um a thought that, I'd kind of slipped into a crisis. I'd kind of slipped into that, oh no, reaction thinking. And thankfully that had not seeped out publicly. I hadn't reacted in any like real
Right,
strategy.
right.
Uh, in the intentional communication with someone that I had selected before the moment happened, we had already developed a rapport. Talking was already a somewhat normal thing. I mean, it's not constant, but we're all quite busy. But, it's not uncommon, right? Set the field for this to happen, for me to take my own medicine, to say, wait, s- steady, know your mission, remain steady, think this through. Okay. It kind of reorients, but I was grateful and humbled that that came from peers,
Yes.
from intentional peer work, right?
Intentional peers.
That happened.
And
Yeah.
you essentially built your fence around your playground ahead of time because you knew you were gonna get to the point where you were gonna push the boundaries. And you already built that fence to protect yourself, right? And to protect your ministry. And so I think asking people to intentionally hold you accountable for things is huge because it communicates a humility on your part to say, I am going to need this. I am going to screw this up at one point. I'm going to need someone to have this speaking power into my life. But it also then opens the door for friendship and for them to say like, hey, you're doing a great job today. Like, I just want to encourage you today because I know that it's probably hard today. And so it doesn't have to be a scary thing. I think the word counsel is kind of funny because it's like, oh, like this big council. But really what you're describing is you're saying, I know that I need things from people and people need things from me. Like we need each other. So we're just taking that step ahead of time to say, hey, let's build this a little bit now so that when we need it, it's already here. And it becomes beautiful to be a part of a community like that because it's both ways too. Like, that just as much as they helped you, they also know they can call you and you will provide that same level of accountability. So it's
Well,
a peer thing.
Emily, that's the thing. And, being vulnerable is, I've taken those calls from many people, but also council members. Like, it is a scary thing for
Sure.
me and probably for others to actually be on a call and say, actually, I've been thinking this or struggling with this thought, or
Yes.
this has been an uncomfortable pain point,
Yes.
for me.
Yes.
Or what I told someone the other day, like, I've lost perspective on this matter. Um, it's a big jump,
It
but
is.
for me, I mean, I realize it shouldn't be, but it is. It's scary. It's a big jump to be on the other side and say, actually, I'm the one. I need to phone a friend in this time period, right? And I say that because I think a lot of leaders are, particularly in this work, are so kind and compassionate, and the concept of giving and supporting someone else is very second nature. The concept of actually thinking I should be the one to call is so foreign, right? And then you think, I'm just being dramatic. I really just being, but these are the things that I've been thinking about, that the practice to pick up the phone is practicing steadiness.
Yes.
Having the group me text or WhatsApp thread or whatever little, I have some threads that are very protected, right? Because if not, it'll be a lot. So very little
Yep.
small threads.
Yep.
And, that little group chat and using that
You have
wisely
to
is
use
the
it.
practice of steadiness that has to, I've learned, already be in place so
Yeah.
that we can lead this well.
Yeah. Yeah. And the fact that you are experiencing being the needy one is actually huge for your ability to then minister to those who are in need. Because you need to be reminded of what it feels like to just bare your soul to someone. Like, oh, that's hard. And yes, you of course want to receive with grace when somebody is telling you these things, but sometimes I think God lets us experience it on the other side so that these things stay fresh in our mind. Like, what does it really feel like to be unable to verbalize what's bothering you, or to be unable to, pinpoint it, or we have to see it from the other side so that we can be better at helping those who we want to help. So that thorn is actually a gift.
Yeah. Well, thank you for chatting with me today. I realize we've, spent our time going on and on, which I could. For those that find this interesting, our conference is coming up. Heartbeat International has an annual conference, and some may not know that we actually have a housing leaders roundtable that is just for executive team members, mostly executive directors, for maternity homes. And it is this protected space. It's not board members. It's not all of the staff that we're responsible for stewarding. It is one concentrated protective space where our leaders come together and we are talking. And we have some facilitated conversations. We have some guest speakers that come in. But this is a time where about 20 to 25 leaders spend the day coming out of that isolation and having meaty, valuable conversations. So if that is of interest to you, check us out. Christine, you can tell us what's the website? How do people find that?
Yeah, absolutely. Heartbeatservices.org is where all of the conference information is located. Right on the homepage, you'll see a big banner where you can click on registration information. Also, for those listening after the fact, and maybe you missed the conference dates, we will have workshops recorded and available on heartbeatservices.org on the store. So there's great opportunities to access those training either way. Some of those are only available in person, and some of those are recorded workshops. All right. Well, thank you, Valerie and Emilie. It was really, really inspirational to get to be a part of your coffee chat today. I loved that. Love how candid you were. I know that leadership is tricky in these organizations. You can feel isolated. And so I think a big takeaway is that you're not alone in this at all. Others have felt the way that you feel, and others are ready to connect with you to help you and support you in your ministry. So if you found this episode helpful, I hope that you will share this with another leader that you know at another organization, or maybe other leaders within your organization, so that we can work together to build and strengthen the movement together. So again, subscribe so that you never miss a future episode. And thank you for listening to this episode of the Pregnancy Help Podcast.